Hey everybody, it's Josh with Talk About Trek, and we are back again today to talk about a very, very special book. The most important addition to my collection that I've received probably that I can think of, to be honest with you, which is, of course, as you know, A Stitch in Time. This is Andrew J. Robinson's own telling, of Garak's story, right? So of course, it is one of the most sought after and rare books that you can get in in the Star Trek lit world, and I was absolutely thrilled that a big friend of the channel, Sebastian, was able to gift this copy to me, which I have thoroughly enjoyed over the past maybe about 2 weeks. I was hoping that I could give this like a very focused, kind of dedicated read, but man, time and circumstances and health were like, nope, you ain't doing that. So, I don't know if you've been following along. I was dealing with some back issues over the past 2 weeks, and it was kind of like one of those things where I was like, oh, I'm down with a back issue. Maybe I can spend some more time reading. But, when you're not feeling good and you're on the pain medication, reading is not the best thing to do, to be honest. So I didn't get to give it that full kind of focus read that I was hoping to give it. But I've just finished up today after giving it definitely a good solid couple hours, within these past couple of days, just to kind of bring it to the finish. And man, it is just so good. And I guess it's very different too than any other kind of Star Trek book really that I've read, because what we have here is not a look at any particular like story or anything like that. This is just Garak telling his story, right, in his own words, in a very interesting way too. And I love the way that they did this, and the way they framed this as him basically writing a letter to Dr. Bashir, after kind of the devastation on Cardassia, uh, telling him some details of his life, and kind of talking about like what he's getting at, what's going on now, and it's almost like a way for him to kind of go and like deal with the stuff himself, right? So anyway, let's not get too far ahead. Let's read from the back here about A Stitch in Time. For nearly a decade, Garak has longed for just one thing: to go home. Exiled on a space station surrounded by aliens who loathe and distrust him, going back to Cardassia has been Garak's one dream. Now, finally, he is home. But home is a world whose landscape is filled with death and destruction. Desperation and dust are constant companions, and luxury is a glass of clean water and a warm place to sleep. Ironically, it is a letter from one of the aliens on that space station, Dr. Julian Bashir, that inspires Garak to look at the fabric of his life. Elam Garak has been a student, a gardener, a spy, an exile, a tailor, even a liberator. It is a life that was charted by the forces of Cardassian society, with very little understanding of the person and even less compassion. But it is the tailor that understands who Elam Garak was and what he could be. It is the tailor who sees the ruined fabric of Cardassia and who knows how to bring this ravaged society back together. This is strange, because a tailor is the one thing Garak never wanted to be. But it is the tailor whom both Cardassia and Elam Garak need. It is the tailor who can put the pieces together, who can take a stitch in time. Nice. All right, that's a pretty cool back cover. I like it. It doesn't tell you what you're getting into. Just gives you gives you a little taste, a little foretaste here. Now, we did have a pretty decent. I lost my spot. Here we go. A little bit of information from, of course, the Voyages of the Imagination. So we can read to you what they have here. And this gives you actually quite a bit of backstory here as well into the role and how things kind of came about, which I thought was awesome. So, Andrew Robinson, auditioned for the Garak role not long after he was one of the 3 finalists for the role of Odo. Originally, Garak was booked only for one show, but the producers, in an effort to give the character of Dr. Bashir a more involving storyline, wanted to see if the Garak Bashir pairing was worth pursuing. Obviously, it was a successful match. Andy remarked, "A Stitch in Time came out of a journal that I began to write for Garak shortly after I began the job. Creating a biography for a character is an actor's tool, especially for characters that have no past or precedents. What did I know about Cardassians? What did the writers know? As the journal grew and I became more involved with it, I also began to read excerpts at various Trek conventions." That's really cool, right? So imagine being at one of those early conventions before this came out, right? Uh, Getting to hear this kind of for the first time. I think that would have been very interesting. "I wanted to do something other than answer the usual questions about makeup and stories from the set, and I thought that the fans might enjoy Garak's reflections on being the sole Cardassian on the station. It also gave me opportunity to fill out his story. I enjoyed the process immensely, and the book just flowed out of the journal after David George, the writer, suggested that I go that direction. He was the one who introduced me to the folks at Pocket Books. To say the least, I was pleased by the result." Andy continued, "The idea for the book came out of the idea that Garak, being dislocated and victimized by the disastrous policies of his government, which in part he supported, needed to write this journal to make sense of what had happened to him. In the process, he was able to achieve a certain amount of peace and healing." Interesting, right? So you get a fair amount of backstory into how the book came about. And I love the fact that this book came about as an actor's journal, his tool to build out the character, right? So, and he would pull things probably from things that the writers would write, things about Cardassia, and it makes me wonder kind of too, like how much of his telling of Cardassia and how things go on came directly from him in his mind, and how much came from like the writers. And I guess basically the question is how much, like, it, for me, the book provides a very interesting look at like this society that is very, very different from our own, right? And is brought up in this like militaristic way because of this lack of resources, so they have to constantly be expanding their empire and taking resources from others. So, and it leads to this very this very different kind of society. And I love the look that this book gives you into that. And I'm sure that there are some other books. I think that there's who is this one by? Yeah, Una McCormick. She wrote the Worlds of Deep Space Nine Cardassia, and I bet that kind of goes a lot into that as well. I think that came after this, though. But, the thought is, I guess, how much did Andrew Robinson did he put into this, right? Because for me, it really is cool to see how the Cardassians are kind of raised, brought up, their society, how they live. You're getting a look at kind of a race that you didn't get a deeper look at before, and are generally looked at as like, the enemy, right? So it's very interesting there. And of course, everybody's favorite Cardassian is Garak, right? I mean, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get one or two crazy people that say maybe Dukat, But Garak is the number one Cardassian, in my mind. There's some other decent ones, but he really knocked it out of the park, and I think created a character that is one of those Star Trek characters that's going to like kind of stand the test of time. Now, they all are, but just a very deep and rich and interesting character that the actor was able to bring a lot to. So anyway, enough about Garak. Let's talk about Garak in the book here. So this book is set up in basically 3 different parts, right? And they give you, and it's framed in the, like, basically it's being told as a letter to Dr. Bashir, right? So you'll have Garak talking about something that's happening present day, And then he goes into a story about his past where he's telling Dr. Bashir, something about went on, that basically kind of how he became who he was, right? And I love too that where does it? Does it even say it in here somewhere? Where Dr. Bashir asked him, what if it was true? It was all true, especially the lies, right? I love that line. That's great. So, there's also that kind of layer of, could it really, is it really? Well, what is really true? What is really truth? From Garak's mouth, right? So, but let's talk about what it's like on Cardassia, right? Apparently, when you're coming up on Cardassia, a lot of it is your station, right? So if your family is in a higher place, you're going to have a higher place in society, right? So, and then that kind of determines like where you end up when you go for your first. They call it Bomber-Ren. It's like this kind of schooling where they learn to be Cardassians, learn to be good Cardassian citizens, right? So, and it's basically like being thrown into like a very, very, very intense like military school, basically, right? And that's what they're going for with their society. So that's how this starts. Well, I mean, you do get like before that, you get Garak with his mother Mila and his father Tolan, right? And this is where he's kind of first learning about like gardening. That's what Tolan does. He takes care of like the grounds of the main Cardassian area and does a fantastic job of it. He can do these orchids that nobody else can make grow, and just has a general like green thumb, right? And that comes up later, right? That's very interesting. They do show a side of Cardassians, or they give like a history of them. That there was a time where they were not this kind of militaristic, they were not this resource starved. Their planet at one point was lush, full of vegetation. At that time, they were, they pursued the arts. There were lots of other things going on like that. But climate change, bad things happened. They became a resource-starved society. They had to become, kind of reach out and expand their empire in order to survive, and that's how they became, what they are, right? So when they get sent to this military school, they're like sent through these series of different tasks and all these sorts of different things that they have to do, and this, I think, for me, was one of the most interesting parts of the book, too, because it gave you a very different look at, I guess, Garak, first off, because you got to see how he became who he was, how he learned these different skills, and I thought it was very interesting, too, how, like, at first when he was there, he was not, like, excelling, right? But then he went out into the desert, and he was basically like the whole thing is like they're going to send you out into the desert, and the whole goal is you don't get caught, right? You got to do whatever you can do to avoid these hunters and not get caught. So Garak, he's out there and he observes these little lizards that are
his name
Bloodhester, and he's phase 4.
Yeah. His name is Bloodhester because he has blood all over him.
He's very bloody, yeah, I see that. That's really good. High five. Nice, dude. Right, here, take that in with the other ones, please.
And before for the viewers, we were doing a drawing challenge.
We were doing many drawing challenges tonight. Some very interesting ones. Mine were not the best, but they were okay. We did all right. Maybe I'll show them to you sometime. Anyway, Garak. He was trying to figure out how to stay hidden, right? So he observes these lizards, these Ragnar, and he takes one and keeps it as a pet, and he learns from this thing, and he learns how to. I really like this part, kind of how to decrease his presence, and like how to kind of make himself kind of almost like melt into the background, though, and make himself not be seen, not be known. Just kind of like the perfect ability for like a spy, right? So, how he learned that, how he picked that up, and then how he progressed that forward to success. But then was betrayed, and I won't get into the whole story about who and what happened, but basically, he was successful, but then once everything was completed, he was betrayed by those that he thought were like his friends, right? So then he kind of went back down to square one again, right? And then, that's kind of, there's a lot more that goes on, but that's kind of like the end of part one. And then in part two, that's when Garak gets the, basically you get to see like the Obsidian Order Garak, right? This is him. You get to see him go on various missions. He has a mission to disrupt peace talks with like a Federation group. He has a mission on Romulus, and I think it's neat too because I know a lot of these I think directly came out of that episode. In Purgatory's Shadow. I don't know. Anyway, the one where he goes to see Tane and Tane dies. So I think there were some things that kind of came out of that they turned into these stories here, and that was very interesting too. And again, the whole time that you're getting this story, he's telling the story as well of Garak going back to Cardassia after it's been devastated by the Dominion, right? Uh, Going through the process of trying to make some sense of things, rebuild, save what they can, do what they can. So you have this present story of kind of all that going on, and then that also, and it just gives you another kind of look too, and which I thought was pretty interesting. And I wonder if there's more that delve into what happens to Cardassia, post Dominion War, right? Because I mean, they were like what, billions or something that were killed. Their planet was devastated. So I think that there is a lot of stories that can be told there as well. So I just, again, that there was a lot going on, and just the overarching story was kind of like almost like him making his peace with, and with everything really. And it was just really, really good, really, really good. So anyway, yeah, and again, with part two, that's basically what you get with him doing these various different missions and just kind of showing his skill, right? There is a little bit of a, not even like a love story, right? But there's like this kind of thing that's going on between him and this woman who he met at the Bomber Inn, and that turns into more intrigue, right? And eventually, that leads to why Garak eventually even got exiled in the first place, right? So you do get to learn what happened there, and there was a mission where Garak was basically responsible for the killing of Dukat's father, and then also um, later on gets into a situation where he was actually going to be killed, but ends up killing this other dude who's kind of like a highly placed dude. But anyway, because of that situation, because of the situation with Dukat, boom, he's sent out to Terok Nur. And what does I guess he was still kind of under a little bit of protection from Tane, right? He couldn't completely protect him, but he was under some protection there. So he's sent to Terok Nur, and what does Gul Dukat make him do? You're going to be the tailor. So I thought that was kind of interesting too, is that's how that started, right? And it started out as like a punishment for him, meant to be something, that Dukat was doing just because he hated him. And then he ended up taking that and like turning that into his thing, right? And it's, plain simple Garak, right? So, and again, part three, I like how part three kind of covers. You get to see that part of Garak's life, his beginning on Terok Nor, and then the switch over to when the Federation takes over as well, and then it kind of ends that part. But then it also goes back to Cardassia, where you get to see Garak, and he's trying to, just kind of find his place, and also help his people as best he can, right? And again, there's a lot of interesting interesting ideas at the end, where the Cardassians are like, how do we move forward from this spot? What are we gonna do? A lot of them are just like going, let's go back to the same thing that we were doing before. There's like a kind of the Federation is kind of pushing them towards democracy, and some of them are maybe thinking about doing that. So there's these differing ideas here, and in the end, I love how that they do this, like this peaceful witnessing, um, where the militaristic side they want to start a fight. They want to get a fight going between these two sides, but the other side just stays still, right? And then the one who's starting the fight is made to look like the foolish one, right? Like everyone's then looking at them standing still, just kind of watching this one guy after everything has already been screwed up in the whole freaking world, still trying to fight, right? So I don't know. I did like that imagery at the end, and it presented hopefully a solid or a brighter future for the Cardassians going forward, right? Anyway, man, that was a fun book. Again, thank you so much to Sebastian for sending that in. Um, I started this channel. I never thought that I would have people that actually wanted to listen and tuned in and then did listen every week. I think that's fantastic, and the fact that we have people that comment and that hang out here, that's awesome. And the fact that I received this fantastic book in the mail from my good friend, that just thrills me to no end. So again, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic read and a very fun talk. And anyone who's a Garak fan, you don't have to get this in the print version. You can find it on ebook. And I want to say they put out a version that Andrew Robinson reads himself, which would be awesome. Which I think I would like to pick up myself. So anyway, that's all for now. Thanks for hanging out and listening. As always, my friends, live long and prosper. And we'll see you guys in the next one. You all have a good night.